I'm talking about Brené Brown's bestseller, Daring Greatly. This book explores what it truly means to show up in life with courage, despite the risks of failure or shame. So if you're ready to embrace vulnerability and take your life to the next level, stick around. First, let's get into what Daring Greatly is all about. Brené Brown is a research professor and TED speaker who spent years studying vulnerability, shame, and courage. Daring Greatly is based on her groundbreaking research and explains how vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's actually one of our greatest strengths. It's what allows us to connect, to be creative, and to live with meaning. In the book, Brené takes us through the myths we have about vulnerability and why so many of us avoid it. She shows how embracing vulnerability allows us to live more fulfilling lives, whether it's in our relationships, workplaces, or personal goals. So, what exactly is vulnerability? Brené defines it as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's about being willing to take chances, to open ourselves up, and to be seen, even when the outcome is uncertain. But let's face it, most of us are terrified of being vulnerable. We see it as a sign of weakness. But Brené flips this thinking on its head. She argues that vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. It's what makes great relationships possible and allows us to pursue our passions. Now, one of the key parts of Daring Greatly is breaking down the common myths about vulnerability. Let's go through a few of them. First, there's the myth that vulnerability equals weakness. This is something many of us believe. We're taught to toughen up and hide our emotions. But Brené's research shows that vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of courage. When we embrace vulnerability, we are showing up in the face of uncertainty, and that takes incredible strength. Think about it, when was the last time you had a real, honest conversation with someone? When you opened up about your fears, your dreams, or your struggles? That's vulnerability, and it takes guts. Another myth is I don't do vulnerability. But here's the truth, we all do it. Whether we like it or not, we're vulnerable every day, at work, in our relationships, in the way we chase our goals. The question is not whether we're vulnerable, but whether we're engaging with it in a way that helps us grow. Brené also talks a lot about shame and how it keeps us from daring greatly. Shame is that inner voice that tells us we're not good enough, that we're not worthy of love, success, or happiness. It's what makes us hide who we truly are. To deal with shame, many of us build what Brené calls shields. These shields are behaviors we use to avoid vulnerability, like perfectionism, numbing our feelings, or pretending we don't care about what people think. But the more we use these shields, the more we cut ourselves off from real connection and growth. So, how do we overcome shame and stop using these shields? Brené says the first step is recognizing and naming our shame. Once we can identify when we're feeling shame, we can start challenging those thoughts and behaviors. Now, let's get to the heart of the book. What does it mean to dare greatly? The title comes from a famous quote by Theodore Roosevelt about the man in the arena. It's about stepping into the arena of life, knowing that you'll face failure, criticism, and setbacks, but showing up anyway. Daring greatly means being willing to engage fully in life, even when the outcome is uncertain. Brené encourages us to show up, be seen, and live courageously, even when we feel vulnerable. This applies to every aspect of life, whether it's sharing your art with the world, having a tough conversation with a loved one, or taking a risk at work. When we dare greatly, we open ourselves up to the possibility of joy, love, and success. So how can we apply the lessons from daring greatly in our daily lives? Brené gives us some practical tools to embrace vulnerability and live with more courage. First, she talks about practicing gratitude. When we focus on what we're grateful for, it helps us shift our mindset away from fear and scarcity. It also strengthens our resilience when we're feeling vulnerable. You can start by keeping a daily gratitude journal or just taking a moment each day to reflect on what's going well in your life. Next, Brené emphasizes the importance of setting boundaries. Vulnerability doesn't mean oversharing or letting people walk all over you. It means knowing your limits and protecting your energy so you can show up as your best self. Empathy is another key to daring greatly. When we show empathy toward others, we create spaces for deeper connection and understanding. And when we're empathetic toward ourselves, we stop beating ourselves up over mistakes or failures. Daring greatly isn't just about personal growth, it's about how we show up in our relationships, at work, and even in our parenting. In relationships, daring greatly means being open and honest with the people we love, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about having the courage to say, "I love you, I'm sorry," or "I'm scared," and trusting that vulnerability will lead to deeper intimacy. At work, daring greatly is about taking risks, being willing to innovate, and not being afraid to fail. Brené talks about how leaders who embrace vulnerability foster cultures of creativity and connection. And for parents, daring greatly means modeling vulnerability for our children. It's about showing them that it's okay to make mistakes, to ask for help, and to be imperfect. So, what's the big takeaway from daring greatly? It's that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. It's the key to living a life full of love, connection, and meaning. By daring greatly, we open ourselves up to the possibility of failure, but also to the possibility of joy, creativity, and success. If you haven't read Daring Greatly yet, I highly recommend picking it up. It's one of those books that can truly change the way you see yourself and the world. And remember, the next time you feel scared to step into the arena, just know, you're not alone. We all struggle with vulnerability, but it's what makes life worth living. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more content on personal growth, and leave a comment about how you're daring greatly in your own life.